Welcome, Erika, Daniel, and Linda to Legal Practice Intelligence. Thank you so much. This is Sunday, I guess, here, and you guys have been very, very kind enough to sort of spare a bit of time and, I guess, coordinating. It's some weekends are special times, and really appreciate you giving us that time. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today and some of the insights we're going to get. Also, I guess we've been chatting with Milan as well, who suggested putting the panel together today. So really looking forward to discussion. Before we begin, just for our listeners and subscribers out there, I just wanted to get some introductions from you guys in terms of just introducing yourself, where you've come from and careers, etc.
I can go first. Yeah, I'm Daniel Trigger. I'm from Brisbane. I've been part of the Legal Forecast and the Legal Forecast Creative, and a young lawyer up here in Queensland.
So my name's Linda Blender. I run the WA branch of TLF. So I'm the WA president. I'm a junior lawyer in WA, and I've been part of TLF since 2019.
Wow, okay, brilliant.
Hey everyone, my name's Erika Lee. I joined TLF in 2017 as the New South Wales president, and I'm currently one of the directors of the organisation. And it's been so exciting to kind of see it grow and certainly scale it across Australia, and decided to kind of share a bit more about that journey.
Brilliant. So what is the TLF?
So Legal Forecast was an organisation very much started by a bunch of law students and young lawyers who were really curious and very almost kind of concerned about the future of the legal profession. This was a couple of years ago, very much when discussions around law and technology weren't necessarily part of the mainstream sort of discussion. And we decided that we wanted to kind of create a space, right? We realized that law schools, legal education bodies, law societies weren't necessarily talking about the impact of technology on the legal profession and necessarily thinking about the sort of issues that might arise from new and emerging technologies. So the Legal Forecast was very much started out in as all kind of student clubs do, in a good pub, and eventually started moving from conversations and discussions to then actually taking action in terms of hackathons and events that we run to kind of raise awareness about these sorts of issues. The Legal Forecast has grown heaps since we kind of started out in the little pub to all of Australia, and certainly different sorts of arms and branches of TLF, as well as with different issues in the profession.
How many, I guess, members do you actually have within TLF?
There's a small board of directors, of which I'm also a member, and also chapters in each state consisting of committees. At any time, there's sort of, 50 to 100 sort of regular volunteers, and there's there's the focus on technology and challenging the status quo in the law. There's also probably since around 2019, with the start of TLF Creative, been a focus on mental health and wellbeing and work-life balance in the law, and that is how the sort of sub-branch TLF Creative was born, which is an arts focused initiative, and we in that separate initiative has over 100 regular participants in terms of musicians and other forms of art that we engage in. And it's I think now a truly national organisation as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, I've seen a LinkedIn. I think you guys have got thousands and thousands of people subscribing to your LinkedIn page. I mean, there's a lot of there's a fair bit of knowledge about it, and I guess we're quite well known within the industry itself. And I mean, so is it international?
There's definitely international connections. I think one of our former directors, Andrew, has moved to London, and I think there's talk of him trying to set the roots abroad there. But there's many international connections, but also an organisation focused probably on the Australian legal sector predominantly. Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting how, I mean, I've worked with technology and law for probably nearly 20 years, and it's so interesting the developments have actually happened. I mean, I'd be embarrassed to talk about some of the technologies I've actually seen. It's incredible, the advances and how it's meant, I guess, client service has gotten better. Be sort of pushing, I guess, or investigating new technologies to be used in law, and how they could be better used and better offering, I guess, access to justice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I often reflect about quite a lot, and certainly what also led me to finding issues at the intersection of this sort of space, was that, I mean, thinking about our particular generation, we're a generation that grew up with the internet. And there's something about being, you know, insanely connected to the world's knowledge at your fingertips. And there's something really beautiful about being able to kind of jump on a Zoom call and, you know, have a podcast with people with across Australia, but also not just across Australia, but across the world. And I think growing up with that also lends itself to a particular way of being and a particular mode of living. And I think we'll hopefully kind of start to see a little bit more of that filter through the practice of law as well, which, definitely helps with the connectedness that we feel as lawyers, as a legal profession, with each other, but also in terms of the access and accessibility, which is very much, again, to do with connection and being able to access services more efficiently as well.
Yeah, and just to further, sorry,
sorry,
access to justice, like in terms of the hackathons, a lot of them have focused on that element, like trying to bring law students and lawyers and industry experts to really come up with ways to help people who normally wouldn't access the law and sort of figure out ways technology to provide those services, because law is incredibly complicated. Lawyers and people industries, and then I just can't imagine how it would be for, you know, non-law people outside in the community. So we've tried a lot with the hackathons to sort of center the access to justice theme and try to use technology to really make law more accessible to people who normally wouldn't have that access.
Really interesting. I mean, how do you think, and this is a topic that everyone I've been reflecting on with lots of folks, but I mean, how do you think the last 2 years, which has been pretty horrendous, have actually, I guess people have relied on technology a lot more, haven't they, I guess, in law firms and working with clients? How do you think the last 2 years have sort of played out from point of view of the practice of law? You know, with COVID and the pandemic and those kinds of things happening, how's it sort of impacted, I guess, the practice of law and technology? And how's it affected you, how's it affected lawyers?
So for me, I started my grad program in 2020. So it was, so I didn't really know much about sort of the practice of law. I just sort of jumped right in, and then I think March or something, we were working from home. So I think for me, it was a bit of a rocky start because I wasn't sure what, but I think sort of having Teams and Zoom like made it really easy to just be able to like call up my supervisor and be like, hey, I have a problem. And as Erika said before, like we grew up with the internet. So for me, that wasn't a strange phenomenon in the sense that I can talk to people in different ways, but it was quite strange going from, you know, like a law student sort of thinking like we're going to see people in person in an office versus, you know, months later you're working from home and having to adapt to sort of that new environment. So it was a bit of a challenge, but I think over time, I think I adapted, and my friends as well who did their grad programs in that year, I think it sort of came second nature in a way as well. So
I really like Linda's point about second naturedness as well. I think that that's kind of also very much built into our DNA. And I think there's, you know, to think about the question of what's changed in the last 2 years, I think I sometimes like to describe it as like one big experiment or one big kind of global experiment or pilot of remote working. And I think, you know, that used to kind of get quite a lot of pushback. And I think certainly when you introduce new changes or, you know, modes of working or even just different kind of forms of innovation practices, there's always resistance to change. And I think part of that though is that you kind of find kind of circumstances or situations where you do have that forced change. But I think that certainly has accelerated the technology uptake. But more than that, it's demonstrated that we can have personal modes of interacting in client delivery that is enabled and facilitated by technology in an efficient sort of manner as well. And it's not like that human connection is any different. It's just a different sort of medium, which I think is a more fascinating point.
I mean, it's really interesting conversation that you have with some law firms. They talk about innovation and law and those kinds of things. And I mean, I guess sometimes you hear the comment that innovation is something that only larger firms can actually afford to put in place. I mean, what would you, I guess, how does that sort of play out across the board?
I mean, I think it's it allows smaller firms and organizations to become a lot more efficient and adapt in the way they practice. Obviously, the larger firms have the established structure and you know, HR and things like that makes it a little bit easier. But but I mean, the change has just been huge. I mean, the idea that junior lawyers at the start of 2020 would have been starting their grad programs from home. I don't know, you know, some of the older partners don't know how they would have thought about that at the time, and now it's just completely accepted. So yeah, I think it's definitely come a long way. That being said, I think we do have to bear in mind that as junior lawyers, it's very important to establish those early links with your colleagues and senior staff to develop your skills, and that does get a bit challenging, I think, when it's fully remote, despite all the advances. So I think we just have to bear in mind as well, despite the fact that it has moved a long way, there are many benefits to you know, in-person learning interactions that I just don't think can be fully supplanted by technology. And I think the courts have also found that as well, despite the fact that we've been moving to online hearings a lot of the time, which has assisted the efficiency of the court process. You know, there's certain times that I think in person.
I had a really interesting discussion last week actually with Nick Abrahams from Norton Rose Fulbright, and which will be the video will be posted pretty soon. And we're talking about things like the metaverse, and I guess, you know, figuring out business cases for that for law firms, how it might apply to law firms and their clients, and those kinds of things. I mean, is that I guess, how realistic is it that law firms might start operating in things like metaverse and people work in metaverse?
Well, with the current technology, or soon to be current technology, maybe, but I still think, you know, people want their lawyers, for example, to see them face to face. I don't think you can ever replace that sort of face-to-face interaction. I know I would feel a lot better if I had a legal problem that I could see my lawyer face to face, you know, permitting. And I think it also takes me back to, I think, my days at uni when there was talks about, you know, robot lawyers and all of this stuff. And I think at the center of law and the legal profession, it's about human connection, and can't really replace that. No matter how, you know, advanced we get tech-wise, I still think we're going to need that in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things, I mean, the whole area of human connection. I remember when I was in a practice, but obviously not legal, but I was in accounting, and I learned loads and loads of things from the folks that I work with. You could sit there and collect the mail, and this is a long time ago, so collect the mail and talk to the receptionist and that sort of stuff, and basically just learn loads of people skills and have that connection. I mean, it's difficult because I'm trying to understand, how do you guys get that sense of connection and learn, get your skills more fine and you know, and actually more honed with the people side of things?
I think this is an interesting question that I've been thinking about quite a lot, right? And I'm probably going to say something I'll shoot myself in the foot in a couple of years. But it's really interesting because like, again, someone who is, you know, spent part of their childhood in games, but also like is growing up with little cousins at the moment who also spend their time very much online. And I kind of reflect on this and I think that, wow, it's really fascinating that, you know, we're kind of stuck to our computers all the time. And I think it's interesting to kind of just even hear, like, down the hallway, little conversations that my little cousin has, because he's like, oh yeah, he is socializing, he is learning different forms of teamwork when he plays games. And I think it's a really different, again, like a different form or different medium, even just the sort of, sometimes the language that you kind of pick up, like internet speak and chat speak and web speak, I think that's a different form of almost like connection, I think you can also say, but certainly it's a different culture that I think we also kind of, is something about that being a culture or a subculture or something that I think it's worth also kind of learning as well. I think whenever you kind of have new different changes in the way that humans interact with each other, there's always new types of languages that are involved. There's new types of, you know, ways of interacting. There's new types of, you know, social etiquettes that you kind of have. And I think it's the acknowledgement of that, but then trying to figure out, okay, so is this something that I, as an individual, want to continue to, you know, adopt, or is that something that I want to discard? And I think that, you know, if enough people do that in aggregate, then perhaps we'll adopt new technologies or different modes and maybe the metaverse. But I think until that realization kind of comes, it's really up to us to figure out what sort of behaviors or patterns of behavior we want to adopt or not.
How would the TLF actually help, I guess, younger lawyers? I mean, joining a TLF and being part of the TLF, how would that help? What kind of things do you do from an educational standpoint, from a community standpoint? What things can young lawyers get out from you guys?
Yeah. Oh, Daniel, you go first.
Sure. Well, I think probably several things. I think there's the opportunity to connect with leaders in the profession, and not just leaders, but your colleagues. It's providing a sort of community, I suppose, of like-minded people who aren't, I suppose, willing to necessarily take the status quo in the profession or in the legal sector more generally at face value. The TLF Creative specifically provides an inclusive and welcoming forum to foster mental health and work-life balance through the arts. And you know, because there are a lot of networking opportunities, but I think it's very important to have these things occur naturally and organically. You know, there's a lot of, you know, one word could be stuffy ways of networking, and in terms of you know, there's certain expectations about what this is, and I don't think that exists with TLF. It's a very welcoming, not closed off or any sort of clique or anything like that. So I think that's probably the main two ways, and also in advocacy in terms of mental health, work-life balance, reducing social isolation, and technology and creativity in the legal profession as well. Broadly, that's how I would describe it. But Erika, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things about TLF for anyone who's interested out there and, you know, the universe. I think there's space for creativity. I think as Daniel kind of mentioned, but also creativity and curiosity. So I think something that TLF does really well is that we hold space for younger lawyers, people in the profession, to just think about the question about, you know, what if, right? You know, what if this happened, or what if the world was a bit like this, or what if our profession was a little bit different? And I think it holds space for us to kind of ask those questions without judgment, as Daniel mentioned, but also from a place of insane care. And I know this is going to sound really fluffy, but care and curiosity and compassion. And I think the people that are drawn to TLF are the people that are just really just really generous in terms of their time, their curiosity, their compassion, their energies, their ability to just think about how we can make our own profession better, but not just our own profession, but also as lawyers within a profession, how our profession, you know, evolves, but then how our profession then operates in the broader sort of context of society, and what are the things that we can do to improve that in our own individual everyday lives. So I think it's for the curious and the creative, and the people who are always kind of willing to ask what if, and, you know, what happens if, and what next. Brilliant. You might want to add something around community or.
So in WA, so when we first started, there wasn't really a TLF per se. So for us, we build everything from the ground up, and being WA far from everybody, we sort of have a weird way of doing our own thing. But I think for us, we just listened. Like, that was the thing that helped us to grow. We put out some feelers. We really listened to what people wanted, and I spoke to a few of the students at the various universities. They just, for them, they knew they wanted to do something different with their legal careers, and they didn't know what it was. And at first they thought, is it just me? But then once they realized there were other people who were curious about, you know, doing different things and doing law differently, they were like, I'm not the only one. So for us, it's been quite nice having that collective group of people who are curious about things and also want to do law differently. I think that's really what's held WA together.
I think that's key. I think, you know, a lot of people think law students, you go in, you do a clerkship in a commercial firm, you'll become a lawyer in a commercial firm and then rise up from there. But that is a very valid career path, but it's not the only career path. And I think that TLF assists with demonstrating that. And also, I think, just touching on what Linda just said, it does provide an opportunity for leadership. I mean, Linda, for example, was over in WA, wasn't really a branch there before, and she's built one up now and has run very successful events, including the hackathon over there. So, yeah.
I think also to just hark on that point as well, and to emphasize what Daniel kind of mentioned, and certainly Linda's a great example of this, is that it provides like space for curiosity and leadership, but also just autonomy and individuality within, you know, TLF as a group. Because I think, sorry, that was a bit messy, but there's something about, you know, come as you are to TLF and bring your own interests, and then have the ability to then action those interests in whatever way you want to make that possible. So you can run an event, you can run an awareness series, you can, you know, write. It's really about expression of you as a lawyer or you as an individual and what you might bring to the law, but also mixed with other interests as well. And I think that's really what we're trying to kind of demonstrate and model here, is that you are able to kind of, you know, as Daniel has also done, like bring your creativity to the law and make music. And you are able to bring your arts to the law and then make art. You are able to bring an interest in mental health or technology. And I think by having those sorts of broad sort of interests in which the law does touch every part of, you know, our lives, you're able to then elevate that, but also start discussions about the sort of issues from a legal perspective, and start thinking about and communicating and dialoguing with others to understand what those issues are and explore those different facets, to think about how we can, as you know, do law better, but also make better change.
Brilliant. I mean, people said there's a talent war out there. What I mean, a war for really, you know, getting great lawyers on board and attracting the right sort of folks. I mean, what lessons could employers be learning, and what advice do you give to employers when they're trying to recruit great young lawyers, great junior lawyers?
For me, I think TLF's been a really good example of that's been support. Like when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing, because my first year of becoming the pres, like, was 2020, so that was written off because couldn't do anything. And then when 2021 came around, I was a bit anxious and hesitant. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Done anything like this before, and just the support that I got was incredible. Like, I could message somebody being like, hey, can I run something by you? So I think employers, I could sort of definitely put in maybe a bit more support sort of networks and structures, because I think that the support of like everybody in TLF, especially like the national board as well, like, I don't think the branch wouldn't be what it is today.
In terms of employers and young graduates, I think it's probably just being, well, I mean, this goes to a broader issue of the law degree and legal education, but a law graduate isn't necessarily going to, you know, on day one be able to perfectly, you know, do X task in X niche area of law. And I think it's, expanding on what Linda touched on, just having those support structures there, realizing that a law degree is one thing, but then it's learning so much more from there. And I think that's something that I think is being people are a lot more aware of these days. But I think if that continues, that would be excellent.
Brilliant. Okay, I mean, from point of view of alternative law careers, I think, Erika, you've done something which is, you've gone a different direction from point of view of using your law degree.
I've done something a little bit different for the law degree. I think law will always and forever be somewhere that is very close and in my heart, and a lens that I will certainly use all the time. I think as I realized throughout my little journey and the place where I was, somewhere around like 2015, 2014, kind of starting to explore this law and technology space, having worked in legal startups, having worked for big technology companies, having then worked in law firms themselves as well. I think being able to kind of do anything under the umbrella of law and technology and then trying to figure out what the common thread was, I realized that at a point, I was somewhat more useful to bring a perspective outside the law to the law. So kind of go off into the field or the forest and then perhaps bring something back to the village. I think that's probably where I saw what I could do, and where at least the stage of my life that I was in and that I currently am in. I think there's something about being able to kind of discover what are the sort of lessons from other industries or other practices that we might be able to understand and learn to then make the legal profession better. I've gone and actually done a Master of Cybernetics, which is a really amazing degree down at the ANU. Where we're thinking about how to kind of think about cyber physical systems. But it's been amazing that I've been able to bring my law policy and governance sort of perspective to that and think about cyber physical systems being the way that we interact with technology and technological systems as humans, and thinking about you know, what is the law as a force in that? How does the law play a role in that? And how does policy play a role in that? And you know, what is the kind of the shape of things when we think about these sort of things? I also work as a consultant, so I think that's been really fun, because I think when you're doing cool strategy stuff, you do kind of get to understand the sort of lessons that other organizations are going through and the other problems that we have. And I think to kind of anchor this back to the law, I think it's been amazing because, you know, you think about the state of digital transformation in the industry, and the law and the legal profession is one of the last, or you know, but certainly one of the last industries to kind of actually go through the digital transformation. Certainly COVID has changed a lot of that. And I think we are at this beautiful position where we can stand on top of the hill, see all the other industries and see all the other sorts of problems that the industries have kind of been through when they've gone through this digital transformation and gone through different ways of practicing. And we can actually kind of see some of those lessons and then apply them more efficiently within our own practice. And I think that's a really exciting thing about the legal profession, is that there's so much opportunity for change and transformation and innovation that it's fantastic. But I think there's also a lot of challenges ahead as well, because you also need people who understand the essence of law, whatever that may be to you, because obviously there's many conflicting ideas. But I think the idea that we need to kind of stay focus on accessibility and access to justice, and being able to practice as good standing, upright, moral, fair lawyers. I think that lens and that core of the law needs to also be then embedded in the sorts of systems or practices that we might develop out in the future. So that's probably my take on how and why I've ended up in a slightly alternative career pathway.
I mean, it's great though, because you do a law degree. I mean, the number of opportunities to actually work in technology. I mean, I've seen people have law degrees go into product management, or go into sales, or go into all sorts of different sort of areas in different organizations. It does really open up a lot of opportunities for people, alternative career opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think, you know what, I think we should stop calling them alternative career opportunities.
Yeah.
Just as a total side note, I think they're all very valid career opportunities and very valid career pathways. It just so also happens that you have a law degree that enables you to solve problems in a particular way, or see the world in a particular way.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think that's right. And I also think it's very beneficial to, even if you are working still in the law, to have a broader, or perhaps have studied a broader set of professional interests. Because when you start a law degree, you are put into a very specific mode of thinking. Here's the issue, here's the rule, here's how we're going to apply it. And that's and by reference to established legal precedent, and that is it. But that's actually not correct, really, is it? There's a whole other and broader set of fields of study and life that while, exactly as Erika said, we have to stick to the core essence of the law, having the broader perspective as well is, I think, crucially important. And also to be able to understand the perspectives of whether it's your clients, if you're not from the same background as them, or other parties as well. I think that's very crucial.
Agree. Okay, well, look, if people are interested in finding out more about the TLF, and where can they go? What resources can you make available to them? I guess, what's the best way of finding out more?
We have a website, which is just thelegalforecast.com. On there, you can find information about TLF generally, or TLF Creative. If you're interested in getting involved in either of those or any of the sub-initiatives, there's ways to express your interest. We're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We're on Twitter as well.
And also, if, for example, if you're interested in WA, like, you could always reach out to like the broader TLF, and somebody will direct your inquiry to a specific chapter as well.
Yeah.
It's been just like nationally what we do as well. We do have a few like national run programs. So just, we basically have everything that you sort of want or need, or if you feel like you've got great ideas that you want to implement or give a go, like, we're really open to that as well.
Thank you so much, Linda, Darren, Daniel, and Erika. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for giving me part of your Sunday. Wonderful chatting with you.
No worries. Thanks, David.